Hello, this is Spellbinder's Report. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to learn the history of the money changers by Andrew Hitchcock, 26th of February 2006. He also wrote the Rothschild timeline. Here's an illustrated version of that timeline, which states, economists continually try to sell the public the ideal that recession or depressions are a natural part of what they call the business cycle. This timeline below will prove that is simply not the case. Recessions and depressions only occur because the central bankers manipulate the money supply to ensure more and more is in their hands and less is in the hands of the people. Central bankers developed out of money changers, and this is with these people we pick up the storyline in 48 BC below. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar took back the money from the money changers, the power to coin money, and then mint coins for the benefit of all. With this new plentiful supply of money, he established many massive construction projects and built great public works. By making money plentiful, Caesar won the love of the common people, but the money changers hated him for it, and this is why Caesar was assassinated. Immediately after his assassination came the demise of plentiful money in Rome. Taxes increased, as did corruption. Eventually, the Roman money supply was reduced by 90%, which resulted in the common people losing their lands and homes. Sound like repeat of history today, with the money changers known as the banksters, the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, the IMF, the BIS. In 30 AD, Jesus Christ, in the last year of his life, uses physical force to throw the money changers out of the temple. This was the only time during his life of his ministry in which he used physical force against anyone. When the Jews came to Jerusalem to pay their temple tax, they could only pay it with a special coin, the half shekel. It was a half ounce of pure silver about the size of a quarter. It was the only coin at the time which was pure silver and of assured weight, without the image of a pagan emperor, and therefore to the Jews it was the only coin acceptable to God. Unfortunately, these coins were not plentiful. The money changers had cornered the market on them, and so they raised the price of them to whatever the market could bear. They used the monopoly they had on these coins to make exorbitant profits, forcing the Jews to pay whatever these money changers demanded. Jesus threw the money changers out as their monopoly on these coins totally violated the sanctity of God's house. These money changers called for his death days later. In 1024, the money changers had control of medieval England's money supply, and at this time were generally known as goldsmiths. Paper money started out, and this was simply a receipt you would get after depositing gold with a goldsmith in their safe rooms or vaults. This paper started being traded as it was far more convenient than carrying around a lot of heavy gold or silver coins. Over time, to simplify the process, receipts were made to the bearer rather than the individual depositor, making it readily transferable without the need for a signature. This also broke the tie to any identifiable deposit of gold. Eventually, the goldsmiths recognized that only a fraction of depositors ever came in and demanded their gold at any one time, so they found out how they could cheat on the system. They started to issue more receipts than they had gold to back these receipts, and no one would be any of the wiser. They would loan out these receipts which were not backed by the gold they had in their depositories and collect interest on them. This was the birth of the system we know today as fractional reserve banking, and like the system of today, this meant that the goldsmiths were able to make astronomical amounts of money by loaning out what was essentially fraudulent receipts, as they were for gold and goldsmiths didn't even possess. As they gradually got more confident, they would loan out up to 10 times the amount they had in their deposits, kind of like what they still do today with your deposits in your savings account. Put in $10,000, they're able to loan out $9,000 of that money out of your savings. And then if they do it to a lot of people, nobody's the wiser. It's the same thing. To simplify how they made money on this, let's give an example in which a goldsmith charges the same rate of interest to creditors and debtors. In this example, a goldsmith would pay interest of 6% on gold you had deposited on them, and then charge 6% interest on the money. I mean fraudulent receipts. You borrow from them as they would lend out 10 times what you had deposited with them. Whilst they are paying you 6% interest, they are making 60% interest on this. This is on your gold. The goldsmiths also discovered that their control of this fraudulent money supply gave them control over the economy and assets of the people. They exacted their control by rolling the economy between easy money and tight money. The way they did this was to make money easy to borrow and therefore increase the amount of money in circulation, then suddenly tighten the money supply, taking it out of circulation by making loans more difficult to get or stopping offering them altogether. Like they do now. They're not letting nobody borrow the money unless you're a corporation. Why did they do this? Simple, because the result would be a certain percentage of the people being unable to repay their previous loans and not having the facility to take out new loans, so they would go bankrupt and be forced to sell their assets to the goldsmiths for literally pennies on the dollar. This is exactly what happens in the world economy of today, but is referred to with words like the business cycle, boom and bust, recession, and depression. In order to confuse the population of the money changers scam, which this is exactly what it is, a great scam. And I'm just going to go down through here now, because this thing, that was only the first 8% of this. This thing is massive. Just look at the dates go by. 17, 18s. A lot done in the 18s with the money changers. Look at all the things the money changers did in the 18s. 19 finally. And this takes us to America, where they ripped us off royally in 1913. They took control of the banks and the money. They took control of the government's money and started charging interest on it, which is wrong. It should be debt-free money. And I'm going to read the conclusion here, which states this when I get to it. This is madness, isn't it? Look at all the stuff they've done. And it's led up to the world today with the IMF and the BIS and the World Banks. Just unbelievable. And here's the conclusion. He says, in my research, I have discovered those critics who currently condemn the monetary system almost universally to suggest that the only solution is to restore gold-backed currency. I don't think any reader of this timeline can be of any doubt that such a system will be open to abuse by those very people, the banksters, who abuse it today. Indeed, if we introduced a currency backed by chairs, I believe we would find ourselves with nothing to sit on. The only monetary system that seems to have worked in history is the one that is backed by the goodwill of a government and is debt-free. Remember that, debt-free. No interest on the money. We are using these banksters' money and they're charging a usury fee on it, or interest. Such as President Lincoln's greenbacks. Fortunately, the Nobel Peace Prize winning economist Milton Friedman came up with the ingenious solution of wresting back control of the money supply from the banksters, paying off all outstanding debt and preventing inflation or deflation whilst this process is completed. I summarize this below. Using America as an example here, Friedman suggests that the debt-free United States notes be issued to pay off the United States bonds, which are debts, on the open market. In conjunction with this, the reserve requirements of the day-to-day bank and regular person banks will proportionally raised so the amount of money in circulation remains constant. As those people holding bonds are paid off in United States notes, they will deposit the money in the bank they bank with, and thus making available the currency they needed by these banks to increase their reserves. Once all these United States bonds are paid off with the United States notes, the banks will be at 100% reserve banking instead of fractional reserve system, and then fractional reserve banking can be outlawed. Exactly. If necessary, the remaining liabilities of financial institutions could be assumed or acquired by the United States government in a one off operation. Therefore, these institutions will eventually be paid off with United States notes for the purpose of keeping the total money supply stable. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and the National Banking Act of 1864 must be repealed and all monetary power transferred back to the Treasury Department. The effects of this will be seen very soon by the average person, as their taxes would start to go down, as they would no longer be paying interest on debt-based money to a handful of central banksters. A law must be passed to ensure that no banker or any person in any way affiliate with the financial institutions be allowed to regulate banking. Also, the United States must withdraw from all international debt-based central banking operations, therefore the IMF, the BIS, and the World Bank. If all the countries of the world adopted the conclusions above, then humanity will at least be free of these central banksters and their debt-based currency. It's a lovely idea, but first we have to get past our corrupt politicians, many of whom are quite aware of the scam that plays us on a daily basis. However, rather than do the job we have elected them to do, they keep their mouths shut and instead look after themselves and their families, whilst the rest of us continue to be exploited. For what will it profit men that a more prudent distribution and use of riches make it possible for them to gain even the whole world, if thereby they suffer the loss of their own souls? What will profit to teach them sound principles in economics, if they permit themselves to be so swept away by selfishness, by unbridled and sordid greed, that hearing the commandments of the Lord, they do all things contrary? Pope Pius the 11th. And it has all the sources of where this information came from. I said I'll have a link to this particular article, and you will be able to conclude for yourself that the only way out of this system is our government take back the money from the Federal Reserve and start to shut down the Federal Reserve immediately and get these banksters, foreign banksters, yes, all but one family. There's, 12, 13 families, and only one of them, the Rockefeller banking system, is the only American, and all the rest are foreign investors or banksters. Man, we got to stop this, and we got to stop it now. And this is the only thing that will save our country financially. We need to go ahead and, I guess, default so we can start this process. Default, make the Federal Reserve show that it's a private banking institute, because most people out there don't know that the Fed is no more federal than Federal Express, Federal Pizza Parlor, or anything of that nature. You look it up in the phone book. It won't be found under government listings, but will be found under the Federal Reserve and or the under the Federal Express and Federal Pizza, Federal mailing service, or anything that uses federal that's not really federal as the government. It will not be found in the government agencies, in the phone book, in the yellow pages, or anywhere. You'll only find it with normal businesses, because it's not part of the government. And when people will realize and wake up that the Federal Reserve is not part of the government, it has nothing to do with a private banking consortium, then you'll understand that we've been hoodwinked all these years and been taught in school that this is supposed to be part of the government, when it's really not. And then we got to start to find people to put in office in the Congress and the Senate and in the presidency that are not bought and paid for by these very banksters, or cannot be bribed. We must find people who are unbribable, who cannot be bribed or even think of the word here in a second, blackmailed or bribed, blackmailed or bought off, or anything of that nature, which is the same as being bribed, or intimidated. We gotta find people it's not. We need to actually get rid of the special interest groups. And I heard the best way of getting rid of the special interest groups is to send all our delegates, the congressmen and the senates, back to their home states and make them work out of their home states. Therefore, the lobbyists would have to travel all 50 states around the country, and it would cost them way too much money to do that, and the lobbyists would start to fade out and disappear. And that's probably the only way to get rid of them, is to get our congressmen and senators back home to their home states and have them spend their time there 90% of the time and only go to Washington when they have to vote on a bill or something, and everything would have to be done in the home states. Until next time, this is Spellbinder. Good day.